All right, let me make sure I'm
All
muted
right.
again.
Looks like we are now live. Let's see. Did it show up where I need it to? All right, here we go. Okay. I have to, okay, I have it off. Okay. Now that I'm talking to myself. Hi, Amina.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Dawn. I'm
I'm
just so
so glad
flattered.
you joined me because this is one of those topics where everybody has questions.
Right, right. No, and I believe that, and I'm gonna try to answer them the best I can. So, so yeah,
Hi,
it's exciting.
John.
Hi, Dawn.
Thank you for joining us as always. Um, so let's start with I know a little bit about you, but I don't know a lot about you. And we're keeping some anonymity here, so you're not actually
Right.
going to be on screen, which is not a problem at all. Um, how did you get here? Like, what got you here to where this is what you're passionate about and this is what your focus is?
Well, it was definitely not a path I chose for myself.
Okay.
I was so this is I'm halfway into my 8th year as a model safety advocate.
Okay.
I had about 15 years of industry experience before that.
Okay.
And I noticed that there was a need in the industry for educational content for modeling, especially around model safety. And that
Sure.
inspired me to create the original Mid Atlantic Model Safety Group, right?
Okay.
And then a few years ago, I realized that the group may not have necessarily been as accessible as to everyone, right?
Okay.
And I felt that there were a lot of people that could benefit from that information, and that there were a lot of like new models, young models that were kind of starting into the industry who are, at the most risk basically. So I
Sure.
decided to launch a public facing aspect of the Mid Atlantic Model Safety Network, so that it was accessible across several different types of social media platforms. So, we have an IG, we have Facebook, we have TikTok, and I started with those three, and I wanted to get the information out there to as many models as possible so they could really start, helping themselves to
Okay.
and protect themselves and all of that. So it was definitely something that I didn't anticipate taking public, and I don't regret it at all. I
Okay.
was kind of trusted by my community with the stories of the things that have happened to them, and I started realizing and kind of putting everything, like connecting the dots of tactics that were being used, red flags that were present, and behaviors to kind of look out for. And I noticed a pattern, and I wanted to kind of share that information because I think it's critical for models to be educated on who they're working with, what they're associating their image and their brand with, and just
Sure.
putting that information out there. So yeah.
Okay. So because I know you're prepared, is there somewhere that you want to start with this information, or you just want me to ask questions? Because I'm all about the questions.
Oh no, please let's answer some questions, and I think that's one of the things
Okay.
that a lot of people want questions answered. So I will do them to the best of my ability. And yeah,
Okay.
so let's try.
Okay. So I know that there's a lot of back and forth, and I'm gonna call some of it, there's some drama a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of back and forth between photographers and models in the sense of who did what, who should handle what. And my philosophy on it is, can you please just keep your hands and your comments to yourselves? I feel like that would just make
Hmm.
this a lot easier. But what would be like your biggest piece of advice? And I'm going to ask this for both, for models and photographers. Like if you could just give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think let's start with the models.
Okay.
I think it's important not to make assumptions. I think it's
Okay.
important to communicate clearly. A lot of so you have a lot of different artists out there, and
Mhm.
the freelance industry attracts all different types of people, and that's a beautiful thing, and that can also be a very dangerous thing.
Sure.
So I think it's important for models to realize that You can't make assumptions about how somebody is. You want to trust and verify the information they give you. You want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in danger, because as a model, you are sourcing opportunities, right? Those opportunities
Sure.
often happen in places that you've never been before, working with people you've never been before, and there are a lot of factors that are very, very dangerous that
Okay.
you should probably accommodate, right? Or not accommodate, but anticipate, right?
Okay.
Um, and having those conversations with photographers going, here are my safety requirements. Here are, let's discuss escorts, if that's a thing, if that's okay, if that's not okay. You should always be clear about your intent of bringing an escort. You should always be clear about the content you're creating. You should be asking questions about where the content is going to end up, because I know that photographers own the rights to whatever content they create by default, right? But
Right.
as a model, you want to make sure that your content is not ending up someplace that you don't want. Okay.
No, I agree with you on that. Actually, when I was talking to Star, the Lemonade Mermaid, her
Mm-hmm.
model contract actually goes into conversation on where the photo, what the plan for the photos is. Like if they plan to make money off of them. She actually had
Mm-hmm.
somebody who used her photos for stock photos. And she's like, that's not what I signed up for. But, to the photographer, that was what they were there for. So
Mm-hmm.
I see where that back and forth, there's a gray area in there if you don't have the conversation. But I think that's kind of part of what's going on with some of what's happening in the industries. There isn't a conversation. Like there's not a conversation happening before other than who's paying for what's the
Right.
theme, what's the idea, that sort of thing. How do you, what would you recommend is that form of communication? Is it always in writing? Is it verbal? Is it always a contract?
I'm a big fan of contracts, but I know that not everybody uses them.
Sure, I don't use
Because
one.
I, it honestly boils down to how much you can trust a person, right?
Sure.
And as long as you guys are having that conversation and it's agreed upon, I mean, I'm a kind of like in writing kind of girl. So
Mhm.
I would encourage individuals, even if it's like a chat log going, look, we talked about this,
Sure.
we agreed upon this. It's like drawing up that call sheet. That's something that I guess that's old school, a call sheet, especially when you're an actor. They're like, you're gonna shoot this scene, you're going to wear this, you're going to do
Right.
this and that, this is what's discussed, this is what you're being
Sure.
compensated for, and all of that. And I think it's really important to kind of like hash that out, because a lot of times people will reach out to each other and they're like, hey, yeah, let's work together, and like that's awesome, and they get caught up in like the excitement of working with somebody new, but they don't talk about the safety accommodations. They don't talk about what they're creating. They kind of
Right.
like let it ebb and flow, and you can create a lot of gray area, and unfortunately that gray area can cause issues, right?
Sure.
So, and on the flip side, you've got photographers who, I believe that everybody has, good intentions. I don't
Mhm.
want to assume that a photographer is, out there doing nefarious things or being a bad actor, but, you have to communicate with your models. You have to be transparent and um, be clear about the content that you're creating. I think that we see a lot of issues with people in the industry who are kind of deceitful when it comes to the content they're creating, and they're like kind of going about it in the incorrect way. So if you're hiring somebody for certain types of spicy content and stuff like that, I see a lot of people target models for that and just kind of make the assumption that models would be open to kind of creating that type of content,
Sure.
right? So you never want to make assumptions, and you always want to be like courteous to the people that you're working with, because I'm going to tell you right now, you will never make it in this industry without the help of your peers, right? We're all in this
Right.
together. Nobody makes it on their own. Everybody should be, looking out for each other. And yeah, okay, that sounds kind of like idealistic, but we're all in this together. We're all artists. We're all
Right.
here to create. We should be free to create as long as it doesn't cause harm or negative impact to anybody that we're creating with. And we should try to be, transparent and supportive with each other.
So, what would be maybe your like top 10 red flags if somebody's having a conversation? Because I know, like for me personally, if men reach out to me about being photographed, I have like a completely different way that I interact with them than I do with some of the females. But some of that's because most of the females I can validate and verify
Mm-hmm.
because everybody seems to know everybody. But, say a female model, and I mean, I guess it works both ways. I think the hard part I'm struggling with here when it comes to, like male versus female is most of the horror stories that I hear are from female models dealing with male photographers. I have
Right.
as of yet to hear one where, a female photographer was an issue. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I just
Mm-hmm.
haven't heard one yet.
I think it's important to recognize that, yes, the negative experiences often happen between a female model and a male photographer, but there are all sorts of victims in this industry.
Oh, sure.
And, but it is important to recognize that yes, it does happen to other individuals, but the majority of it happens to, women. And
Sure.
having to obviously you don't want to assume how it's going to end up, but you need to be able to be vigilant about if a male photographer reaches out to you. Like, we're not saying that automatically a male photographer is bad or dangerous or whatever, but there are red flags. Let's start with five. So um I always appreciate people who keep things on subject. I know a lot of artists are very kind of free spirited and they get so inspired by each other and very excited, but I don't think that off the bat somebody should be overly friendly or familiar with you, right? I
Okay.
feel like there should be conversations around boundaries, like contract boundaries, like taking steps to protect your privacy. So if somebody drops into your DMs and goes, hey, my name is this, here's my portfolio, here's the work I do, I love your look, let's collaborate, whatever, that's cool. But I want an opportunity to review their social media footprint, right? Because often,
Sure.
like, let's face it, modern models and photographers should have a decent sized digital footprint.
Hmm.
I want to look at their work. I want to make sure that their work is consistent, isn't stolen, because that happens a lot, and that's actually been happening
Yeah.
more often than anything. And the terrible thing is that you go to somebody's Instagram and you look at it, and for me it's like I look for consistency. If there's inconsistency, what I'll do is I'll just pull a picture and I'll reverse Google search it, image search
Sure.
it, right, and see if it's legitimate. And if it is, that's fine. If I can't find it, that's fine, I can have another platform. But I mean, and the last couple months alone, I've had probably about 5 different instances of people stealing other people's work or trying to pass off other people's work as their own. So
Okay.
that's an issue. Um, but yeah, look for transparency, look that they know what they want to shoot, look that they are addressing you, um, properly. They're not calling you sweetie baby. They're not telling you that you're sexy. They're not, they're using
Yeah.
inappropriate language and stuff like that. When a photographer approaches you and says, "Oh, I have this great concept" or whatever, and they send you these like kind of, for lack of a better word, like lewd images, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
as examples of what they want. I look for diversity in people's portfolios to make sure that they're not just, if you're good at shooting one thing, cool, that's fine by me. But if it's obvious that you're kind of model collecting or like collecting the same kind of body type or the same look or whatever, and it becomes more of like a personal preference kind of deal versus a uh, an opportunity, that's always a red flag for me as well. Um,
Okay.
and then, just to make sure that they keep the conversation on subject, that they're not asking overly personal questions, that they are not like, you know, messaging you at random times. That,
Like
here's what
midnight.
exactly, here's it, just basically just be straightforward, be transparent. This is what I want to do, this is what I have in mind for you, let's talk about it. And then you can organically kind of move into, okay, what are your rates, how do you want to do this, because everybody's got different rules of engagement. And I
Sure.
think that there are a lot of models who, not only do we have to be models, but we have to be marketers too. So,
Sure.
we're hitting up a lot of people, and I feel like it goes both ways. People are their art is valuable to them. People deserve to be compensated for their art. And you never you never know how a conversation's going to go, and you don't want to offend anybody and you don't want to upset anybody. And, some people draw a hard line about their boundaries and those conversations, and some people don't. And, you have to remember,
Right.
as a model, we're taught to be agreeable. We're taught to say
Right.
yes, and we're taught to follow directions and, be easy to work with, and take, feedback from the photographer, because they're like, I want you to change your look. I want you to change your pose. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And you need to be able to be receptive to that without having an attitude, because you're there. You're literally being hired to do the work, help them create their vision, and you should be accommodating. But that accommodation stops at inappropriate requests, things crossing boundaries, pushing you past your limits, all of those things. So I think the biggest thing I try to tell models is find a way to say no in that initial booking conversation and see how the photographer responds.
Okay,
Because
that's fair.
if, and people are so used to hearing yes and not being, you don't want to deliberately challenge them, right? You don't want to have an attitude about it. You
Right.
just want to say, I'm not really comfortable with that, or like, I don't know, I don't really like that idea, or like not something as aggressive, just be assertive and be like, no, I don't think I'm really into that. And then watch for their reaction.
Sure.
Because I feel it's critical that if you're working in a safe and respectful environment, you should have consent, right? You should have informed consent on what you're creating and what you're doing, and you should have the ability to say no, right?
Absolutely.
And because of the environment that we're in, we're in a studio by ourselves with a person we've never worked with before. If we tell them no and it goes south, then that's dangerous. So
Oh, this is interesting.
testing those waters is very, very critical, because
Yeah. No, it makes
yeah.
sense. We actually had somebody comment, DB Cooper commented and said, I think it's important to have a set of yellow flags, since yellow flags can lead to
Mhm.
red flags.
Absolutely. And it's the way that they speak to you. It's the way that they respond to you when they ask questions about, are you okay with this? Is this within your realm? I always look for people who are asking for stuff outside of your desired or advertised genre. Okay.
Hmm.
So like if you're a spicy content creator, that's awesome. You advertise that, right? You
Hmm.
set the precedence that that's the type of work that you want to do. If you're a fashion model, that's the type of work you want to do. If you're boudoir, if you're whatever, as long as you're openly advertising it, that's fine. But never assume that, as a photographer, they shouldn't be assuming that just because you're a model, you're open to everything, right? And then
Right. Sure.
also, just because you shot certain content with certain people, doesn't you don't shouldn't assume consent that the model is going to shoot that content with you,
Right. No, I
right?
got you.
But yeah, he's
So,
absolutely. I mean, they're absolutely right. Yellow flags are important because and it's how they talk to you, how they treat you, how they communicate with you, how they um, what's the word? How they provide the information to you,
right.
and if you just ever so slightly push back, that reaction is very important to recognize too. So the
That
more
makes
research you
sense.
do, yeah, the more research you do ahead of time, the less likely you are to have issues when you get there. Now, that's not always the case, and it's not always 100% foolproof. But by
Mhm.
doing your due diligence and doing your research and getting references and doing all of those things, you can help prevent an issue.
Right. So let's talk about actually being in a situation face to face, because some of the models that I've talked to that have had altercations or issues
Mm-hmm.
haven't actually addressed it in the moment, whether it's fear of safety, fear of not getting paid,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and uncomfortable having the conversation. What are some tools that they could potentially utilize to help them get beyond, that fear or that anxiety?
I think it's always best to uh, take into consideration your safety first, right?
Right.
So, like you said, sometimes the situation is that you can speak up, sometimes you can't. Sometimes,
Right.
you're alone in a studio with somebody and there's nobody else around. What do you do? And this is where situations come in where you should have an emergency contact, you should have an emergency action plan, right? So like
Mhm.
before you go in a shoot, you should tell somebody where you're going. They should know where you're going, your address, your phone number, the way to contact you. They should know what time you're going to be there, with who you're going to be with, and how long you're going to be there, right?
Hmm.
Call in before, call in after. There are several different types of apps that you can use, personal safety apps.
Right.
Um, I I'm kind of a, you know, and I understand that the experience is going to be different. I feel like a 5 foot nothing, 90 pound soaking wet model is not going to, talk back to
Sure.
somebody who could potentially, physically overcome them. So
Yeah.
you have to be extraordinarily careful about how you address situations. And 9 times out of 10, people don't like conflict. I get that. So
Yeah.
if you address something calmly and directly, like, so let's say, a photographer says something inappropriate or starts pushing you past your boundaries, just stop the conversation, right? And tell them, look, can we talk about this for a second? I don't appreciate this, and I'm not comfortable with this, or I'm not willing to do this. Can we please understand that and move forward? Obviously, we're always looking for a way to move forward, right? Because you want to be
Right.
able to have a professional conversation, keep it calm, keep it direct, keep it respectful, right? Don't make assumptions, because sometimes, honestly, some people are really bad at communicating. They can be a great photographer, but they're bad at communicating. Or maybe you just didn't
Right.
maybe you just didn't comprehend it right. Like, that's a possibility too. People communicate in different ways, and sometimes somebody says something
Sure.
offhand and they don't mean harm. They just said it and it's inappropriate, and nobody's ever kind of crossed that line with them, or like establish that boundary with them. So I always try to bring it from a place of just respect. Be like, look, you said this made me uncomfortable. Can we please move forward from this? And again, as long as you're safe to do
Right.
so, do it. But unfortunately, sometimes there's, when you're out in public, I call it bar rules. Like, if a girl's in trouble and she can communicate like non-verbally with the people around her by showing her
Right.
that she's uncomfortable, and that, a stranger can swoop in and help her out. Like, I don't know about you, but I've done that so many times for women
Sure.
that I've seen that are having, like, a really tough time or being cornered.
Same.
But, when you're on your own with somebody, that's why it pays to, have a game plan and to address the situation directly. And if you can't resolve it, or if things kind of go south, then you can say, I'm sorry, I got to make a phone call real quick. You got to get exit plan, or you can just call the shoot. I mean, sometimes I know everybody wants to make the profit. Okay, I get that.
Right.
I get that profit is king. I get that. The reason that people get into this, get into modeling, is because they have the ability to freelance and generate a profit. But sometimes that profit is not worth your safety, right?
Right.
So trying to remove yourself from the situation is critical, especially if you feel unsafe. And we've seen time and time and again situations where models were not able to get out of those situations safely, and they just kind of disassociate, and they kind of do what they needed to do to get out of that moment, and then it doesn't really kind of connect until after the fact. So
Okay.
I think encouraging, and I know that, every time I say escort, the photographers just groan. Like, I know, I hear it. It's just that there are some environments that, you should be able to ask for accommodations, such as an escort, especially if
Well,
you're
so
working. Oh, go
I,
ahead.
I don't think there should ever be an issue with having an escort. And that's like a big red flag for me, because
Mm-hmm.
anybody should be able to have an escort. There should never be an issue or a reason. Now, if it's like a space situation where like there's not enough space, that person should be able to stand like either in another room, on the outside
Mm-hmm.
of a door. I don't care. And that's personal opinion on the fact that I think that to me would be like a huge red flag is if there's an issue with an escort, because there should be no reason there can't be. That's actually one of the reasons I like the events, like doing the bigger group events. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's still issues at the group events, but you have a
Yeah,
group of individuals that can handle a situation as opposed to just you being the only one in it.
exactly. And I mean, I agree 100%. I agree that escorts are something that are critical. I mean, I'm old school. Like, when I went to shoots, I always went by myself. And, it was kind of expected to, do a phone screen, or at least I personally would do a phone screen. I would meet them in a public place and kind of get a feel for them beforehand before booking an actual shoot. I had many different things that I would do in order to protect myself, but, you know, occasionally you would run into problems where you would just have to assert your boundaries and talk out through the situation. I mean,
Right.
I've left shoots before because, I told the photographer, look, I told you these are my boundaries. I don't do this. I don't do this.
Yep.
You keep pushing for this. I told you nice the first time that I'm not interested in doing this, and you kept pushing,
Yep.
and we're gonna end the shoot right here. But I mean, that takes a level of confidence, and it also takes a little level of security that some people just
Absolutely.
don't have, right? And
No,
I'm
I
not
agree with you on
saying,
that.
and model safety is one of those things where it's like not one size fits all. Like you actually have to practice it. You have to practice de-escalation. You have to practice professionalism. You have to practice just as much as you do when you're modeling. Those things are key to the experience, and you have to invest the time and, have the wisdom of dealing with those situations and knowing that this may not necessarily work, but you can try this. And I feel like having the conversation as directly and as calmly as possible will usually deter anything else, because if you call somebody out on their behavior, they may not necessarily know that they did something wrong. So at least that gives them the opportunity to recognize, hey, I've made somebody uncomfortable, and they've expressed that they're uncomfortable. And, perhaps that should be a hint to, maybe not do that, or maybe think twice about saying something like that. And,
We're we're
yeah,
gonna
okay.
touch we're
Okay,
gonna
go ahead.
touch base on that again in a second. Uh, DB Cooper said that I hear what Amina is saying, and maybe it's important to find out their limits. What might be okay with one may not be okay with another, which is absolutely true. But the interesting part was escorts can be a hazard since they can damage the set. I don't know if I agree with that, but I guess I could see
Yeah.
that point of view. I
So
guess it would depend on what you're doing.
Yeah, I've heard photographers get upset because, somebody was an escort and they weren't properly briefed on what they were supposed to do. I mean, I think it's your responsibility as a model that if you're going to bring an escort with you, that you should have conversations with them. Look, you are there to be seen and not heard. You are not there to get in the way. You are there for my,
Yeah.
personal safety. The person needs to realize it's not about them. It's about the person that they're escorting, right? They need to have nonverbal cues, verbal cues, like I mean, I call it a safe word because, that's what it is basically. A
Right.
word that they use, a game plan, an exit strategy, some way to communicate to each other if something's going wrong, or going off course. And they absolutely need to be prepped for that. You can't just bring a boyfriend or bring somebody that
Right.
I feel
Well,
like
and
the best, yeah.
I think that comes on to the photographer as well too, though. If you're allowing an escort, I think that's fine. But the photographer, I think, has a responsibility there too to be like, hey, so here's where we're shooting. I need you to stay over here. There's a chair
Mhm.
for you, or whatever it is. I think that falls on the photographer's realm of responsibility as well too. Um, let's see. Hang on a second. John Cohen said one escort actually helped me during a shoot. That actually happens a lot. I've seen that a
Mhm.
lot. I can't tell you how many husbands and boyfriends and girlfriends and wives and stuff. They're like, yeah, I can go run for that, which is great. Not everybody likes that, but some people appreciate it.
It's so funny.
Um,
There's a photographer that's always joking. It's like, oh, it's just another, somebody to hold a reflector. It's a free
exactly.
assistant. Yeah, it's a
Just
free
hold the
assistant.
ladder. Thank you. So let's switch this over to the photographer side for a little bit. Um, because a lot of times things will happen online, and then I'll have photographers reach out to me to ask me questions. They're like, hey, I never thought of this. How do I maneuver this? How do I maneuver that? And sometimes I think all of it's just so subjective to whoever all of the parties are involved. And for the photographer side of it, when it comes to, because sometimes even the models are the ones that are inappropriate. That
Yes,
happens.
that
and,
happens a
and
lot, actually.
yeah, so it's like there's such a gray area sometimes when I see people interact. My thing is like, we're going to be as professional as possible. And, if you need a bra strap adjusted, I'm going to ask first. You can take care of it or I can take care of it, but I'm not going to touch you unless I know I can.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we should have to say those statements. Like, I feel like grown-ass adults should know, but I understand that some people are predatory. But for the average everyday photographer that's not predatory, what would be some of the things that pieces of advice you'd want to give them on how they should maintain or approach when they're working with a model?
So when it comes to photographers, and I'm going to speak directly to the photographers now. The fact that you're concerned about your model experience is a beautiful thing. The fact that you're willing to look at your um, look at your habits, look at your professionalism, and analyze them when you encounter situations that don't necessarily, that either go sideways or don't go as well as you wanted them to. Just the fact that you're taking the time to analyze that is just bravo.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just not self-aware. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And the fact that you're concerned about your peers or your model's experience is a beautiful thing. So, with that being said, how do we solve all issues? We communicate. Now, communicating is one thing, but you have to make sure that the person you're communicating with is understanding you. That's
Yep.
important too, because comprehension is key. You can say
Yep.
everything you want, but as long as the other party is not comprehending what you're saying, then you're not going to get anywhere. So
Yeah.
if you're approaching your models, so it's I think it's different, and when it's somebody you've never worked with before versus somebody you've worked with multiple times,
Sure.
building building that trust and building that relationship takes time. Okay, it takes time, it takes effort, and you gotta build trust with somebody, right? And more importantly, when you build that trust, you need to not betray that trust once you've built it with
Right.
them. Okay, so when you're approaching a model that you've never worked with before, you, I don't want to say be on your best behavior, because that's not it. I just, be considerate, be kind, think about what you're asking them to do. Check in with your models. Like, nobody says that you don't, all you're going to do is bark directions at your models. Check in with them. Ask them how they're doing. Are they comfortable? Is there anything they need? Do they have any feedback? Like, I know that that seems like a lot of conversation to have when you just show up and you want to shoot and you want to get, your content banged out because you only have a certain amount of time, but just check in with your models. It's really that simple. And
Agreed.
if you notice that somebody is frustrated or awkward or shy or, not struggling with something, say something. Be like, hey, how you doing? Like, are we okay? Do you want to take like a quick break? Just having those conversations and taking into consideration the other person's feelings it does so much. Just a simple ask. And that's how we navigate all situations.
Right.
You may not necessarily you perceive a situation the way you're going to perceive it, but the way you make other people feel is important. And you
Sure.
should be able to be receptive to any sort of feedback that they have. A lot of models, there's a lot of people out there who are, for lack of a better term, stubborn, and they're not going to complain. They're just going to soldier through it, and
Yeah.
being able to read that, and also being able to register when somebody's going through um, the model high, you know what I mean, is being respectful of that individual that you're collaborating with. You're there to create content. If you're not respecting the person that you're creating content with, then you're just kind of, not I don't want to use the word exploiting, but like, you're just using them. They should be an active part of the scenario, and they should be able to speak out about their experience. So, communication is key. Just
Yeah. Well, I
talk
mean,
to your models.
I think that's the biggest part across the board is communication has to happen up front on boundaries.
Right.
Um, I mean, I had a shoot I almost shut down at one point in time because the model was high, during the
Ooh.
event. And I opted not to because she had a chronic pain issue, but it was so
Mhm.
noticeable in her face, that it
Yeah.
was just like, I mean, what are we doing here? So, I mean, it happens on, on both sides of the fence. Hang on, DB said something else. I considered ending a shoot with a traveling model since she was tired from traveling. She wasn't putting much effort, but damn, I had already paid for the time. Well, now there's something, in that situation,
Mhm.
do you push forward or do you try to reschedule? I mean, I guess you bring it up as a topic, but I guess DB, if it sounds like you try, oh no, you considered. Did you have a conversation with the model about, hey, you look like you're a little tired. Do you need a minute, or do you want to reschedule, or was there just no time in her travel? We'll let DB get back to that. I was going to segue to something else. Talk to us about model agencies and what to look out for with model agencies.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So
I
there's
feel you.
there are so many things. Okay, so like just a teeny tiny little segue, right? So like
Okay.
obviously the resources, the public resources are new. When launched, it was more about trying to like start conversations and kind of address issues within the community. And then now it's more like providing resources and steps and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Agencies, I think it's important for models to know their markets, right? So
Okay.
it's important for you guys to know your major markets, because then you can recognize that there are agencies that are not going to scout you directly. Okay, like I know it's everybody's unicorn to be scouted by an agency, but the reality is that they have thousands and thousands and thousands of applications a day,
Sure.
right? So the likelihood of a person from a modeling agency reaching out to you with an opportunity is slim to none. Okay.
Sure.
So be smart about where you're applying, do your research, always do your research. Try to find somebody who is currently either represented by that agency or have been involved in that agency, or just as agency represented to begin with. I
Right.
think that a lot of models shy away from talking to their peers about business because there's this undue like competition between everybody, and I think that that's one of the most detrimental things to our industry, is how competitive everybody is. You don't have to tell
Sure.
them their whole life story, but like look out for your fellow model. I mean, seriously, it's not that difficult. Like everybody's
Yeah.
going to have a different experience, but just care about each other. We're all in this together. Look out for your fellow model and be respectful of their time and their effort and their energy and all of those things. But take a chance, reach out, talk to somebody who's represented by this agency and ask them about their experience.
Sure.
There's a lot of really good references on YouTube of what it's like. This is what it's like being an agency model, so on and so forth. This is what's expected of you. Just
Right.
remember that there are a lot of agencies that advertise themselves as agencies, but what they are is they're actually like schools. And
Hmm.
that's when you want to like stay away from, is that if you're paying for classes, or if you're paying
Right.
for social media followers, if you're paying for certain things. And there's also a lot of different places where you can source legitimate opportunities. But I mean, just do your research. If they're an agency, they're going to have a website. And on that
Right.
website, 9 times out of 10, it's going to say, if somebody contacted you telling you that they're going to represent you, beware of scams. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
Wilhelmina has this giant banner, and it's the first thing you see when you get onto their website. Beware of
Sure.
people impersonating, Wilhelmina agents or
Yeah.
whatever. We will
That's
never ask
sad.
you via social media to, whatever. So, agencies are definitely a part of the industry. Unfortunately, as the Model Alliance recently exposed, agencies are also responsible for some pretty heinous stuff, including trafficking and exploitation of models.
Yeah.
So it may not necessarily be a safer bet. There are legitimate agencies out there that will have a
Right.
good experience, but there are
Yeah.
also a lot that are not. And I mean, they recently called out Elle and Wilhelmina and all of those like high level agencies for basically encouraging trafficking and model exploitation. They're not
Yeah.
paying their models like they should. And there's actually a website called modelalliance.org, and
Okay.
they are working on creating uh, laws and that protect artists and models from, not being paid on time and being treated unfairly when it comes to, pay to play schemes for runway, sticking like 18 different models in a model house and not having them, have any sort of agency over their career. And just there's a lot of problematic things that oh, sorry, hold on, give me 1 second. I got somebody coming in the door here.
Okay, no problem.
I'm so sorry. My boyfriend's coming home from work. Okay. All right, so I'm back. I'm sorry.
No
So
problem.
yeah, agencies are not necessarily safer than being freelance. Sometimes they are very necessary, but
Right.
look out for costs up front. Look out for agencies that say you can only shoot with certain photographers or that you have to pay to, play basically. I mean, the reality is that you look a lot of these models that are, what do you call it, uh, participating in New York Fashion Week. They're
Mm-hmm.
paying. They're paying to be there. They're not
Okay.
getting paid. So don't think that, you know, that level of the industry operates in a way that's beneficial to models in any way, shape, or form. I mean,
Yeah, I had
yeah,
come across somebody had sent me what was it they sent me? They sent me a link on Instagram and it was for a fashion show. And it said it had a photographer form, it had a model form, like it had all these forms that you filled out depending on what you wanted to do. And I'm digging into this and I'm like, I don't understand. They wanted you to shoot, they wanted you to pick a block that you wanted to shoot in. You were going to shoot 3 models in 3 different outfits, and then you were going to provide photos at the end. But you were going to pay $150 to be at the event.
yep.
What?
That's one thing. There's also ones where they ask you to sell tickets that you have to sell a minimum of 5 tickets at $75. and
Interesting.
that and that when you sign up they tell you, oh, here are your stats, here are your measurements or whatever, and you understand that you are volunteering your time in order to participate in the event. So there's three
Yeah.
different kind of things, right? So you've got like your traditional scam, right? You've got people that are costing you time and money. You've got people that are running bad businesses with bad business practices, right? And then you have people who are basically selling the dream. Okay, they're going
Right.
after people who want to be, so like, obviously we're not going to name names here, but there are agencies where it's like, your kid can be a star, and anybody who applies to the agency gets in as long as they pay the
Right.
$2,500 fees and classes and stuff like that. Like that, those are not agencies. Those are businesses that are taking advantage of people, right? So you have to be so careful and realize that a lot of the really great opportunities you're going to have are going to be the ones that you source for yourself, especially
Right.
with, especially with applying to agencies and also to finding opportunities. I feel like models kind of wait for stuff to come to them, and you should be just as involved with your career and where you want to take it as the people
Right.
reaching out to you.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we're gonna touch base on something a little further on that because I have a question. But DB Cooper gave us something else. Says overseas work is a risk for a photographer. Foreign agents can ask for your legal name, tax
Oh
information.
yeah.
Legal agents do ask for that, but malfeasant agents can build a fake profile to lure. And that's a big thing is the scam stuff. Like I get spam emails all the time like,
Mhm.
"Hey, we want to hire you and here's what we're going to do, but give me all of this information." I'm like, "No, but that's okay. Thank you."
Yeah, the ones that I always see are, well, so right now Instagram there's three primary scams. There's the
Okay.
one where the person reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I love your look. Can I draw your picture, or can I get a digital? Can I use your likeness in a digital way to sell to a client?" Okay, and
Okay.
that is infringing copyright issues. That's also problematic because they're selling content that doesn't belong to them. And
Right.
it's basically a check cashing scam essentially. So what they'll do is they'll get in your information and they'll say that they'll pay you a certain amount, but you have to pay out somebody else, or you have to cash a check for them and then pay them and reimburse them.
Right.
And
That's been
basically
around forever.
the check is fake. It keeps changing, right?
Mhm.
Same with all of the, famous fashion company is scouting models, any age, any gender, any height, any whatever. You'll get a
Right.
stipend of $5,000 for you to buy wardrobe, shoes, accessories, or whatever, and then you have to pay your makeup artist or whatever. It's the same deal. The check is fake.
Mm-hmm.
They send it to you. They get your banking information, and then boom, they're out. You're out however much money they promised you because your bank was like, no, they cashed the check, right?
Right.
So, um, more concerning is people will post in networking groups and they'll go, I have this opportunity. It pays $5,000, email, photographer's name at gmail.com to be considered. And basically the same thing. They're scheming information. They're fishing information off of you. So,
Right.
responding to those castings it's never recommended, but people do it because they think that they're special and they're different and they're not going to get taken advantage of. But you have to realize that there are a bunch of really like scammers are everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're a model, it's in every aspect of our
Yeah.
society. So,
Absolutely.
being educated about what you're investing your time with and what you're responding, you can eliminate 99% of issues if you just take a look at who you're responding to. Always verify
Right.
the information. First of all, verify who you're talking to. That's difficult to do. And don't be giving out personal information to somebody you don't know. They're not
Yep.
they're not looking to help you, honey. They're looking to scam you. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be it's hard. There's a balance between being hopeful and excited and inspired by being a model, which there's you do you. Everybody has the capacity to make the modeling experience what they want it to be, but you have to take your brain with you.
So I want to go back and touch on because this topic has come up before, like in my own group of people. Um, and I'll use something that's pretty public to talk about it. There is suicide girls. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll use that as an example. Being owned by a brand, I don't agree with it. I feel like we should all be here for support, but
Hmm.
my understanding, even with that particular company, was there was a lot of exploitation, a lot of being the models being taken advantage of. But we're
Hmm.
also seeing it sometimes with a photographer who has their group of models.
Hmm.
And what's your viewpoint on that?
So, so here's the thing. There should be nobody who makes themselves, how does it, makes your decisions for you. Okay?
Agreed.
You should have free agency over the decisions you make, the people you want to work with, the way that your image is used, and the type of content you create. Okay? I don't care if this person is, a celebrity photographer, whatnot. They should not be offering to make your decisions for you. They should not be, I mean, there's a difference between taking career advice and being guided in a certain
Hmm.
direction and being influenced in a certain direction. I also feel that, and this may be kind of controversial, but I just want to make sure that we're clear about people using it with bad intentions. But I think that a lot of models are sold female empowerment from a male point of view, and
Okay.
they are pushed in certain ways and pushed to create certain content that is um, presented to them in a way that these guys will tell them, oh, it's beneficial, or oh, you'll make more money, or oh, whatever. But in
Right.
actuality, they're just straight exploiting these girls. And
Hmm.
it really depends on the person, right? So like obviously, we look at Playboy and we look at how now that Hugh has passed, there's all these stories about the corruption and the exploitation of the people that were involved in this. And we
Sure.
realize that this industry attracts that. And
Right.
because this industry attracts that, I feel like it is beneficial for models to be suspicious of anybody who would tell them that they have to work with this person, or they have to comply with this
Exclusivity.
person's request, or they have to work with exclusivity, because 9 times out of 10, I promise you nothing good will come to it. I mean, there are people out there who care, right? There are people who care. There are people who can
Sure.
help you and support you and be critical to developing your career, but you have to be careful who you put your trust in, right? especially when they're not asking you what you want out of it. They're just
Right.
telling you. And that is a very important distinction. You
Right.
are 100% have agency over yourself, your image, and how you want your career to go. Nobody should be telling you what to do. Nobody should be claiming exclusivity. And all jokes aside, if they want exclusivity, they should be paying for it,
Yeah, I
because
agree.
the time that they take you away from all of your other opportunities, then they should be compensating you for that.
Right. Well,
But
yeah, I mean, and so that's it too. So then that comes down to, um, do you have any, we'll say red flags again, or things to pay attention to with contracts? Because, that would be something like, even if I use Suicide Girls as an example, they have they originally, I
mhm,
don't know what it is now, originally they had a contract that gave that brand exclusivity to their look,
yep,
essentially.
yep. And you had to understand that any images that you submitted to Suicide Girls, they had the right to use in any capacity. They also had a right at the time. Now I'm familiar with it because I was actually on the forums of Suicide Girls back in the day,
Okay.
and I was familiar with the requirements, and I was also on what do you call it, Zivity, whatever that was short
Okay.
lived, same deal. But basically they own your image. They had to You had to do like events, like some of the girls had to actually, like, they had a burlesque tour and they had a couple other events that you had to participate in.
Okay.
You could only shoot with, I can't remember if they limited like what style of content you shoot, but whatever the content was, you couldn't use it on any other platform. So like if you shot a set for Suicide Girls owned it exclusively. So, understand the contract. Always read the contract. I think a lot of people don't discuss the contract until the day of the shoot, and that's not the way to do it. Like,
Right.
there's no reason why you should get any guff to ask the photographer to take a look at the contract beforehand, just so that you understand it. And that's
Yeah.
another thing too, is that as a photographer, if you are giving a model a contract, you should be giving them a fair enough time to review it, right? Because some
Agreed.
people's contracts are shorter than others. Some people are using kind of like generic contracts that they find online. And like,
Sure.
I think models don't really understand that. And I'm going to tell you right now, ladies, or at least models, 9 times out of 10, that contract is not benefiting you at all, right?
Right.
So as long as you have a conversation with the photographer of, like, where my image is going, how I can use it, and usage is very important too, because there are a lot of models who don't seem to understand that if a photographer pays you for your time, they don't necessarily owe you images. For some reason,
Right.
that's like a really big. I don't know when that became like the norm, but obviously professional courtesy, so on and so forth. People will make exceptions, give you a couple shoots, or like they'll tag you in whatever they create. But a lot of the times, if you get paid for something, you don't necessarily get anything back. You're getting paid for your
Right.
time.
Well, let's talk about that too, because a lot of the events and stuff that I go to, it's usually TFP or
Mm-hmm.
time for print, time for photos. I like calling it TFT, time for talent, because there's talent on both sides. But with that, and that's one of the reasons I don't really do a contract, is because a lot of times it's time for time. Like, we're
Mm-hmm.
getting together, we're having fun, we're creating something. We're both going to use, or all the parties involved are going to use the images however they choose to. It's why I don't do a contract for that type of time. um, you know, because there's a gray area with that too.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the photo. Technically, it's my art, but that person took the time, probably spent money on whatever it was that they created their image as.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so paid versus not paid.
I think that no matter what, there needs to be discussion, and
Agreed.
I think both parties need to agree to how the content will be used. Is it going to be sold? Is it going to be used on social media? Is it going to be used to, across social media to potentially net other talent, other opportunities? Is it promotional material? Just having those conversations, whether it's TF or not, because there's a lot of, like, I think the biggest thing I hear models complain about is that I went to this event, I did TFP, I never got my pictures back.
I've heard that too. I've
I
heard
hear
that
that
too.
all the time, and like,
Yeah.
they're not going to like my answer. Honestly, TFP is always a risk. Okay. It's always
Yeah.
a risk, and there's some really amazing individuals that do TFP. There's a lot of people who've built their entire career around that, of like trade and doing those things, and
Yeah.
they follow through. But you have to remember, again, there's no regulation to all of this. So
Yeah.
somebody can make a promise and then life gets in the way and you're out, the time and effort that you took to show up at this event and have these pictures taken. A lot of the times too, you'll have people who show up at TFP events and, God love them, they're an enthusiast or they're a hobbyist or they're, just a starting off, and you can't use the pictures. So I feel like
Right.
it's really important, and I mean, please don't let me just say that, you know, whatever step you are in your journey, you're valid. You know, you
Right.
It's okay to be a beginner. It's okay to not want to monetize your art, because I think that there is a lot of pressure on artists nowadays to monetize their art. It's
Mm-hmm.
always this side hustle, it's always that. So, no matter what level of artist you are, it's okay. It's just that when you trade with somebody, you're either trading for content or you're trading for experience, and
Right.
it's important to differentiate between the two.
Sure.
Sometimes you're going to have the experience of, modeling for somebody, but the pictures might not be so great. And you know what? You showed up to a shoot, you did your, you provided what you committed to providing, and
Right.
it was a learning experience. It doesn't necessarily result in something that you can use. And I think a lot of people forget too that, at some point TFP is great. It has its purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people use it as a segue to refresh their portfolio, or net better work, or start getting to the point where you charge. But it all really depends on what the person's trying to get out of it. And I feel like the more upfront you are about what you want to accomplish with the TF, people are going to let you down. People are going to be disappointed in what they
Sure.
get. Things are going to happen. Life is going to get in the way. You could have a really great set and then the photographer breaks their arm and they can't photo edit for 6 months. You know what I mean? Just talk it out. You know, I think it's really important for people to just simply communicate with each other and level set expectations. I think people go
Right.
into TFP with really high expectations and they get disappointed and they don't know how to process that disappointment. And instead of communicating, they just make assumptions, and then all of a sudden it's everybody else's problem, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
so
it's hard.
here's my other thing too, and you said a word that triggered my thought about regulation, because there's no
Mhm.
regulation. There's really no rules or regulations other than what, the cultural society deems to be like the unwritten rules. In situations where someone's inappropriate, and because this has come up to me from a couple of photographers that have asked the question, if so and so was appropriate with this model, why didn't the model report so and so? Is there
Right.
really any place to do that unless it's something grossly egregious?
So, I'm a firm believer of private uh, private forums, especially women only private forums. I feel like women have always been really good about warning each other about potential issues, and
Hmm.
I'm supportive of that forum. Also, you're right, and the unfortunately the statistics around assault and issues of that nature are dismal when it comes to the victim's experience, and victims and survivors are failed by the system every single day.
Absolutely.
And I think that the industry fails victims and survivors every day as well. A lot of
Sure.
there will always be people that say, "Oh, well, she's just making something up to, personally attack this person or to benefit." And I was like, somebody show me the last time that somebody spoke up about being abused and it was to their benefit.
Right.
Seriously, like, every model that I've ever known that has stuck her neck out for her peers and talked about somebody who abused them has gone through, you know, a war basically, because people will literally tear the situation apart and find a way to blame it on them. And, you know, there's the victim blaming, and there's the kind of lack of support for people that come to terms with what happened to them and they choose to speak out about it. And
Right.
I have never once seen it benefit somebody in the way that, you know, these people think, oh, well, by speaking out, she's just trying to get attention. You know, it's
Right.
really
Right.
sad. It's so sad. And like my, I say my job, but my mission is that, you know, when I have somebody come to me with something that they've experienced, I'm going to try to be as empathetic as possible. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to make them, you know, understand that they don't, they only speak to what they want to speak about. I will listen and acknowledge everything. I will ask their consent. You know, I will thank them for their time. I will thank them for sharing their story with me. You know, I will give them resources. RAIN is a resource that I send them to. There's also a victim advocacy group based out of PA that I reference people to often. Um, I've taken a lot of courses on how to support and advocate for survivors. So I have a very dedicated mindset when it comes to supporting these women and making sure that they feel heard and seen and valued, because I feel like
Hmm.
survivors often get, you know, people go, oh God, that's drama, I'm just going to step away from that. And it's just, it's
Right.
the absolute opposite of what people should be doing. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really, the sad thing is that there's a lot of really popular people in the industry who are absolutely garbage human beings, and they put on, you know, this absolutely great facade, but
Yeah.
have like, but literally create a just a human toll across the industry. And at some point, you know, we know that statistically the likelihood of them seeing accountability is slim to none. So I
Right.
think models are finally getting to the point where they're like, you know what, we're just going to look out for each other. And, you know, whatever people end up saying, that's fine. But if there's a pattern of behavior that's being noticed, if there's a pattern of behavior that's out and about, or if you see certain tactics, or if you see, you know, certain behaviors, then that's a, you know, a yellow flag, an orange flag, and a red flag, and they need to be talked about. Because if you don't talk about what's happening, it becomes normalized. And if it becomes normalized, then people are just going to expect that to happen. And nobody deserves to be taken advantage of. Nobody deserves to be abused for wanting to create their art.
Sure.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well,
So
and the
it's tough.
I think the unfortunate part is that it's such a playground for predators because, you
Mm-hmm.
know, creative people are so excited to be able to create because it's just what makes them thrive, that
Right.
it's just this like open door for, you know, anybody with some sort of like predatory manipulation tactic, you know, they figure it out, they figure out the way that it works, and, you know, they keep moving through it. I know here lately, you know, a lot of people have been, you know, they'll reach out when they want to start blacklisting someone. Um, that one's always a little tough for me sometimes because what information do we have that this person needs to be blacklisted? Did they just piss one person off, or have they done something that really shows that this person? And I think that's sometimes where the balance comes in is you want to
Mm-hmm.
believe everybody.
Right,
You want to
right. But
believe
you
that
want to do
more
your due diligence.
exactly.
You have to. I mean, you know, I more than anybody recognize the importance and the responsibility of, you know, running a model safety group. There are, I have a three strikes and you're out rule, or not three strikes and you're out, but like, you know, once a pattern of behavior has been established, that's an issue. You know, we don't do blacklists. I don't believe in blacklists.
Okay.
I think that it's more beneficial and it's more helpful to teach models to recognize patterns of behaviors and tactics,
Okay.
because then it takes, when you name someone, people who are their friends are going to react a certain way. And I think that
Sure.
in order to remove bias, if you identify the patterns and tactics and issues behavior wise, I think it's a lot more effective than just calling out an individual. Because I can tell you for a fact that a lot of these guys, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't say guys, a lot of these people and predators use the exact same tactics.
Sure.
I don't know if there's like a book that they're all reading out of reading out of, but I can tell you that there are dozens of behaviors and I think that nowadays with people being as educated and as vigilant as they are, we hear a lot of talk about narcissistic behavior, which personally I just,
Mental health in general.
yeah, exactly. People are more aware about mental health in general. And like, you have to also understand that it's important to differentiate between somebody who's having a bad day and somebody who's a
Right.
bad person. And
Yeah.
that's important too. Like, I don't want to be I want to be responsible. I also want to support the victim. I also want to make sure that I'm not, spreading false information. I want
Right.
to protect my interests, and my mission is to protect the model. Okay, like,
Right.
there are enough instances where we recognize that the balance of power definitely favors the photographers in the industry and the models are at a disadvantage. That's just
Right.
the reality of it, right? The fact that 70% or was 77% of the modeling industry are women, right?
Okay.
And women experience sexual violence and assault and harassment at a higher concentration than other individuals do. So those factors all tie into the preventative measures and the outlook that you have to have when it comes to stuff like that. I mean, sometimes you'll get a red herring, and like, I'll be the first to admit there are times where I've gotten it wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
sure. I mean, it
and
happens.
I'll be the first person to eat crow and tell you that I got it wrong.
Right.
I have no ego in this fight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I care about model safety. I care about the mission. I care about the individuals in the industry. I care about their experience. That's my motivation.
Hmm.
I'm not making money off of this. I'm not,
Right.
I'm not being hired by anybody to endorse them. I'm not accepting endorsements. I'm not,
Right.
I have a dog in this fight, but I am not influenced by anyone. Right.
Right.
So, and I can see DB Cooper's comment says bad behavior, no matter how small, can hurt a group shoot.
Well, and
Absolutely.
I want to say something about this too, because when you're in a group environment and something gets brought up while you're in the group environment, because we recently, and I'm not going to call out the event, but recently this happened, and to keep it as vague as possible, so that I'll get my hand smacked.
No, I
One
gotcha.
of the one of the photographers that was at the event was showing a model content of him with spicy acts with other models on
Yeah.
video. And then that wasn't the only issue. And then apparently this person leaned in to kiss them more than once. And
Oof.
then supposedly the model slapped the photographer. Apparently the event people, it didn't sound like the event people were able to get to the photographer before he left.
Right.
But DB, to address that, it depends on what is happening. If it's something where it's inappropriate comment, remind them that they're in a professional environment and then
Right.
that's not acceptable, and give them the opportunity to correct the behavior. If they don't correct the behavior, they do have to go.
Right.
If they paid money, guess what? It's non-refundable. You should have brought
Yep.
your good person behavior that day.
So group shoots and stuff like that are a really hot topic right now because that happens a lot.
Yep.
And conduct is one of those things where you should be creating environments where your models feel safe and where that there are conduct expectations for everybody that attends. And if they don't meet those conduct expectations, then they should be removed without
Agreed.
warning. And I understand that there are a lot of people who run events because they're passionate about it and because it's something that they want, an opportunity to run. but there's a responsibility there. And there are precautions that you should be taking. And, one of the things that people don't ever think about is you have to set expectations. If you don't
Hmm.
set expectations for conduct, then people are going to assume that they can do whatever they want. And you have to remember, professionalism means different things to different people. Okay,
Yep.
some people think they're professional, but they've never seen it, in real life. They've
Right.
just It's just their perception of professional. And granted, depending on the genre and depending on what kind of content you're shooting, there are specific and different rules
Yeah.
for how you interact with each other, right?
When I can give an example of that too, because we've done a couple of shibari shoots where it's the
Mm-hmm.
model is rope tied. It's a group environment.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's boundaries needed to be laid on the table when the day started,
Yep.
what needed to be communicated to the rigger. And that should be every event. And I think after going through this, and I even talked to DB in the comments, I think I'll do a live on events and what events should look like, and
Yes.
some of the parameters and stuff. But all of that should happen while the event is being planned. That should be in the group chat, the group event, however it is that you're delivering that information. And whatever the boundaries, code of contact, whatever code of conduct, whatever term you want to use for it, all of that should be a conversation long before the event happens.
Absolutely. And I think, like I said, people are very excited to get group events together.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to make money.
Yeah.
And, I get that you can have really great intentions, but some people are out there putting profits over people and over model safety. And I find
Yeah.
that personally, I find that unacceptable. And I know that, to be fair, I'm sure that those individuals are not intending to do so, but I feel that, if you're running an event like that, there should be a dedicated group of people who are running the event,
Yep.
especially somebody who is on the outside, not modeling that day, but somebody who
Yep.
can be vigilant of what's going on around them. I feel like there needs to be more strict um, requirements for attendance and for code of conduct and for talking about those things, because 9 times out of 10 it's like, you have this event, you put up a link on Facebook. Okay, then, here's the studio we're going to be at. It's $25 for whoever to
Right.
for the models to attend. It's $150 for the photographers to attend. And that's, sign up here and that's it. And that they don't. And granted, when you have a business to run, I understand. Like, I get it.
Sure.
You have to make a profit. Okay, we are in the business of making a profit and covering costs. But if you are using that profit as an excuse to not put your foot down if somebody is literally out
Right.
there harassing or manhandling a model,
Yeah.
then you are not setting precedence for a safe environment. And your peers should be judging you harshly for that. Because, like, if I was a model and I showed up an event and I was told that, XYZ was going to be there, these are the expectations of it, and somebody manhandled me, and I went to the event, the coordinator, and was like, this is unacceptable. Like, obviously, I'm going to make my effort to be like, look, I don't appreciate being touched like
Yeah.
that. Please step away from me, blah, blah, blah. But if I go to an event coordinator and tell them that I had an issue and they go, oh, it's okay, I don't want to make a big
Yeah.
deal, or it's a cultural thing, or whatever excuse that they want to use.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I get
that
it.
is BS. That is absolutely BS. And if
Yeah.
you're gonna run these events, you need to have the backbone to protect the people that come to your event,
Yeah,
right?
and yeah, I agree, because I mean, usually, a lot of the events that I've been to, some are really well managed, if you will, and some of
Mhm.
them, like, everybody's just, it's a free for all, and I don't
Right,
particularly care either way, because I'll control whatever chaos I need to.
right.
But I think if you don't, I think if do not start with me. I got almost through this before you showed up. Yeah. Every time, I'm not even kidding.
Oh,
Usually he shows up right at the beginning and then he
that's
makes
so
this like
funny.
appearance like in front of the camera, but we're having a
Oh,
conversation. Okay. Um so a lot of times, like, if I do the group shoot, if I pay to go to one, obviously I'm shooting while I'm there, but if I'm helping to host one or hosting one on my own, I a lot of times won't shoot. Yep, there you are. Welcome. It's
Here,
just
kitty,
going to be
kitty.
every time now.
It's a cat, right?
Every
Okay, yeah.
time. Yeah.
Aw.
um so I agree with that. There has to be rules, there has to be some semblance of planning, and they have to know who to go to, who's
Exactly.
hosting the event, who do you go to if there is an issue or a concern. And then
Yeah.
Crystal, I did see your comment. It's my understanding that this event had some rules in place. I saw some of the things beforehand. So this person was stepping out of bounds. Yeah, I mean that's they showed up with the intention of what they wanted, whether they got it or not, they didn't care, but they were going to give it a shot anyway.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure, like, like I said, the event coordinator, I'm sure they had the best of intentions. I'm sure that they thought
Yeah.
out things, but
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
you have to be ready for it not to go to plan. Okay.
Yeah.
And you have to have measures of what happens if it doesn't go to plan. Do you have security? And I
Right.
understand that all of those things often incur an extra cost,
Right.
and profit margins are tight to begin with, but being able to foresee, and that's another thing too, is that, not I, I may talk a lot about model safety, but I can always afford to learn more, and I can
Sure.
always reach out to others and ask about their experience. And I feel like people just want to just do it on their own. And
Yeah.
I feel like we really need to normalize people reaching out to each other. Like,
That's why I started
seriously.
That's why I started doing the lives, actually, is because I
Yeah,
had people that were constantly reaching out with questions, which was fine. I didn't mind answering the questions, but found myself answering the same questions over and over again. And I'm like, if I have the information and I know the information is out there, the information can be sourced, but maybe they don't learn the same way that I do. Maybe they don't do the research the same way that I might do it. So
right.
that's what started this, is just the fact that there are a lot of questions, and though most of the information's out there, it's not in one place. And talking to the people that know about the information is really helpful. So
And
thank
I
you.
think that you have to approach it from a point of view that everybody knows something you don't. And
Exactly.
I love when people reach out and ask questions. And again, I had the same experience where people were asking the same questions, and I was like, well, here we
Mm-hmm.
go, we're going to create some resources. But
Yep.
being able to extend that olive branch helps everybody. And, like, yeah, okay,
Absolutely.
there are people in this industry who have, like, misconceptions about each other and have, like, misunderstandings, and are too prideful to reach out. And, like, I'm telling you, if you have a question, my inbox is always open. I know people
Yep.
think that, like, I'm this, like, total, hard ass, like, line in the sand, always
Right.
talking about, and that's another thing too that I like to say, is that I know that for the photographers that are listening, I'm in your corner too. I'm in everybody's corner.
Right.
I want us all to talk to each other. I want all of us to understand and respect each other, and just know that we're all in this together. And the bad actors may set a certain tone within the industry, but we all have the power to combat that by holding each other accountable, by leading by example, by showing the people that are continuing to do bad things in this industry that we no longer accept that.
Right.
You have to be, I tell models all the time, you have to participate in your own rescue.
Right.
What you tolerate will continue. And I'm sorry to get all heated. Like, I'm so passionate about this. I just, I
Can
mean,
feel it coming through the
you
phone.
know, babies, just do what you love, but create responsibly, be kind to one another. And, like I said, it's kind of like, Star Trek life, like, everything's ideal and everything's the best version of what it could be, but we could really
Sure.
be like that if everybody just invested a little time to get to know each other and stop
Yeah.
coming from a place of ego and just reach out and connect with each other. I mean, our local communities are so valuable, so valuable. There's so many things that people just assume they know because they've been operating on their own little island. And when we
Right.
all start to talk to each other, we share information, we share red flags, we help each other, we teach each other how to deal with awkward situations, we encourage and support each other. It's such a beautiful and valuable thing.
Oh, I agree with you. And Crystal just said feels like it should be common sense and common decency. That's the thing that I hear the most from models
Hmm.
is I shouldn't have to tell a grown person or an adult, not to do this or not to do that. I'm like, yeah, you should.
Yeah, you should. And it's
Yeah,
not
you
insulting
should.
their intelligence. It's not insulting
Yep.
their intelligence, but the bar is literally on the floor, guys. If we just
Yep.
communicate with each other and like take the time to walk through things and talk about it and discuss it and have an open conversation with the goal of finding a solution, can you imagine
Right.
all of the harm that we could undo, all of the progress that we could make in our communities? I mean, just by simply coexisting instead of competing with each other.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and
and
that's it. Because this comes up even with photographers. One of my favorite photographers, he always talks about the fact that, he's always in competition, whether it's with himself or with others. And I was like, okay. I said, I don't care. There's enough out here for everybody, but I'll compete with you if that's what makes you motivated.
right. And I mean, I think just people need to learn to be kind to each other and
Yeah.
also understand that, you know, people's experience and people's behavior says more about them than it says about you. And there are a lot of people out there who have significant trauma, and that trauma really affects their judgment and affects how they navigate their life.
Yep.
And it's important to be understanding of that. Some people, their trauma makes them make bad decisions. Other people, their trauma makes them be
Shut down.
exemplary because, yeah, exactly, or shut down, or be the opposite of what they've seen as problematic because they've seen what it looks like when people
Right.
don't grow and evolve, and they don't want to be that person.
Right.
It Everybody communicates in a different way, and some people have challenges when they communicate, and just because they're part of the industry, that's wonderful that they're welcome, but they need to understand that if you're interacting with other people, it's your responsibility to make that person feel seen, heard, and valued.
Right. Right.
So,
John said kindness and respect, the easiest
mhm,
things to show. Agreed.
absolutely.
All right. Well, we have gone over our hour, and I told you
Oh,
I
I'm
would try to
sorry.
keep
I'm
it
so
to an
sorry.
hour. No, 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 no. I mean, I could talk all night, but
I'm so passionate about this, and I really,
I know that
I'm
you
so
probably need to
long-winded.
get
I have to
back.
be so good about that.
Hang
But
on a
Dawn,
second.
I
DV said,
appreciate. Oh, go ahead.
DV said, Amina, working with Asian photographers who are Shinto, they always consider what is it like to be the other person, so they are
Yeah,
usually kind. Okay, that's a good
I
tidbit of information.
I love that viewpoint. Okay,
Yeah,
like we talk so much about treating other people how we would want to be treated, right?
right.
And that is key. I think that a lot of the problems that stem within our industry are based on communication and the fact that people don't aren't considerate of each other because they
Yeah,
don't necessarily know what that may look like. There are some people who
right.
don't know how to be kind and considerate, who have only experienced interactions with their peers where they were being utilized for something, or they were being used for something, or they were,
Right.
where it was transactional, right? But
Yep.
the people you keep around you and the creatives that you support are what's going to create your experience, right? And the environment that you create it. So that is critical to make sure that you're creating
Absolutely.
with your trusted, tribe, for lack of a better term. You don't have to work with everybody. Not everybody is going to be at your speed, and not everybody is going to be have the same heart as you. Just find your people and create your art and be happy.
I think we see that a lot. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they were a little frustrated with the fact that they feel like, photographers eventually just pick like a handful of models they work with, or models pick a handful of photographers that they work with. But I think that's exactly why is there's a comfort level that happens,
Yep.
because I've noticed that the male photographers that do well do not make people uncomfortable. And
Yep.
that's usually the reason that they do well, and booking models or just booking people in general is because they don't make people uncomfortable. I don't think some of the male photographers realize that that's really the reason, but that's usually, from what I've seen so far, the reason that they do well.
Right. And then, if you don't mind, I'd like to do a shout out. All of this research and all of this information and all of these viewpoints. These are not things that I come up with by myself.
Sure.
I have an absolutely incredible support system. I won't name them because I respect their privacy, but
Of course.
understand that this is not a one woman show. This is, there are at least a dozen individuals who I utilize as my personal soundboard to make sure that we're doing the ethical thing, that we're doing the right
Right.
thing, that we're making the right decisions, that we're putting out the right information, that we are being coming from a place of love and support and kindness. I'm always asking for feedback. Is it too harsh? Is it too to the point? Is it coming from a space of this is something you should be doing, not this is something you have to do. And it is definitely a community, and I am so grateful for the collective of women that I have had the honor of being trusted by and working with alongside to create this model safety mission. And
That's
I'm
awesome.
I'm so just thankful to have a platform now, and this is
Yeah.
just the beginning. It's just the beginning. So
Well, that's awesome. I'm really, really thankful for your time today. I
thank you.
appreciate the fact that you were willing to come on.
Absolutely. And, I'm always happy to answer questions. Please reach out. My DMs are always open. I try to level set expectations because I do have a full time job, but I promise you I
Sure.
will circle back. I will circle back, and I openly invite photographers, event coordinators, anybody. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've heard about me. I don't care what you think about me. Extend that olive branch. I'm willing to talk to you. I'm willing to help you. My investment is in the community. I don't hold a grudge. I'm not here to make enemies of anybody. I'm just here to, help everybody come to an understanding and ask better of our community and, ask
Sure.
each other to treat each other with dignity and respect. So I
Now,
welcome all of it.
is there do you have a preference on how you would like them to reach out to you?
So the Amina Artois account is like a personal Facebook, personal quote unquote, right? So you can reach out to that one.
Okay.
You can also DM me on Instagram. I do have a website, and for the website, you can also email me at info@midatlanticmodelsafety.org. Any social media, reach out to me. I manage all of them. I'll
Okay.
have notifications on them, whatever. Just send me your questions. I may not necessarily be able to chat with you right away, but I will get back to you, I promise.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to doing whatever you need to do for the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for your time and
Absolutely.
for dedicating your platform to this. I really do appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate you too. You have a good
Yeah.
night.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.